أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على أفضل الأنبياء والمرسلين بعد الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وسندنا وشفيعنا مولانا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين اصطفاهم الله أجمعين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق وهو أصدق الصادقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. Respected brothers and sisters, I bid you all assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to thank you guys for having me. It's been a while, ever since Muharram. I haven't been to Miami, but it's great to come back and see you guys again. Without further ado, there's a specific topic I'd like to discuss for the next upcoming 3 nights, and that topic relates to many of our discussions which we had in Muharram, specifically with the concept of balance within our lives. If you look at the way that a Muslim, specifically a Shia, is fine-tuned today, a lot of our movements are fine-tuned from emotional things outwardly towards other things in our lives. And what I mean by that is an individual can come into the masjid and sit and listen to any lecture. He can sit and listen to any musibah, and his automatic reaction can be crying and tears. And this individual's tears are not exclusive tears because he is a Muslim or because he believes in this tragedy. But these tears any human being can produce. If I wasn't a Muslim, I'd be able to produce these same tears. If I was a Christian, I'd be able to produce the same tears. If I was a Jew, I could produce the same exact tears. It's one concept. At the same time, when we examine it from the other direction, a human being who comes into the majlis simply for an emotional display, where he wants to come and feel really good and then walk out and say, you know what, I felt really good about myself and that's the only reason why I'm here. This person benefits, but the benefit is very minimal. It's a minimal benefit. And what I mean by that is when a person does benefit, his benefit is simply on an emotional level, and it's not higher than that. The second level of a human being who really starts completing himself is an empathic human being. And this word is very important, empathy. And I'm going to dissect this word, empathy. The meaning of empathy, many of us have heard the hadith where we say that if a person wants to understand himself, he should first understand the outside world and himself in order for him to understand Allah. And we typically hear this. Now this discussion is interesting because not only can we understand things from our own point of view, where I look inside of me and I understand Allah or the world around me. Actually, the opposite also works, and the opposite means that I see things from the outside in. I look at things from the outside and I project them inside. Instead of introversion, where I look at myself inside, I'm looking at outer version. I'm looking at things from the outside in. And many people don't see it that way. Typically, people see it simply about them. The world rotates around them, and there's a different dynamic here. So empathy is the understanding that when I do something, when I understand something, I am removing myself from my shoes and putting myself in somebody else's shoes. That's empathy. Is when I take myself out of my own comfort zone, my own boundary, and I put myself in the boundary of somebody else, where now I'm completely shifting the way I think. I don't see it through my own perspectives, but the way I see it is from the perspective of somebody else, and that perspective changes my whole life. If you look at the Quran is filled with examples, but before I go there, let me give you a brief example. You and I are biologically created to feel empathy towards people. We are biologically created to feel other people's pain, to feel their sorrow, to feel their value, to feel their success, to feel their negativity. We are biologically made that way. There was a study done in Italy in the 1920s, where what happened is there was a lab, and there was a monkey, a primate, was given a small nut and was told to open the nut, and brain sensors were put on his head. And they wanted to sense which parts of his brain would light up if he takes this nut and he eats it. And what happens is he takes this nut, he eats it, and a specific part of the brain went off. This specific part of the brain that went off, scientists marked it and said, okay, this part of the brain went off. At the same time, while they're doing this experiment, a normal scientist walked in, and sometimes things happen like this in science, they're extremely accidental. A scientist walked in, had no idea an experiment was happening, and he sees a bowl of nuts, he takes one, he opens it, and he eats it. And when the monkey saw this scientist take this piece of food and eat it, the same part of the brain which lit when it ate the food itself lit again once it saw the other person eating the food. And what scientists did is they went back and said, okay, there has to be some sort of trend where people feel other people's pain and sorrows. There has to be some sort of trend. And they tested this on so many animals and finally on humans and found out that when you and I see a person in pain, we feel their pain. When we see a person who's in sorrow, we feel their sorrow. We don't simply just sit there and say, oh wow, that's really nice. That's beautiful that these people are getting shot at. Now I go back to my own life. No, we actually feel it. And what we do is innately we try to change it. That's why whenever you see, if you watch a movie, the way people come to us is through emotional appeal. We have no control over it. It's very hard to control it. An emotional appeal can be tweaked in that way, but there's a difference. There's an emotional appeal which is simply emotional, where I simply cry, and after that nothing changes in my life. And there's an emotional appeal which is empathic, and this is what I want to talk to you about. Empathy changes the way you see things. Not only do I see my life within a small horizon or within a small spectrum, but now I see things on a holistic view where I've taken the vision of someone else. I'm actually literally taking myself out of my own shoes and putting myself in their shoes so I understand what they're doing and what they're saying. And if I really want to do that, if I really want to be able to do that, then I have to step out of my system of boundary. I'll give you a simple example. Many of you here have read the book Animal Farm by George Orwell. He also was the author of 1984. This same author, at one point of his life, decided that after being so successful, after writing books, after joining the army, after doing a lot of these things in my life, he grew up a very privileged human being. I'm going to go tramping in the streets of Britain. And what he did is he put on the costume of a very poor person, and he started going in the streets, running house to house, place to place, acting as if he's very poor. He was a chimney cleaner. That's what he acted he was. And he writes in his books that one of the best experiences that I had in my life was when I left my comfort zone and I actually put myself in the life of someone else. That's one of the best things I've ever done. It wasn't only good for him, it did great things for his work. It made him more creative, it made him more understanding. But this example of empathy, if you examine it, each and every single story you hear about our imams doing some great work, great moral work, it's typically done within the same circle. We see it as extraordinary, but there's actually a way where we can reach that, where I can become that empathic, moral human being. I'll give you a simple example. Many of us have heard of the story of the Prophet, Nabi Muhammad, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. Many of us have heard of the story of the Messenger of Allah, the Prophet, where he's walking and there's a Jewish lady next to him. And she's cursing at Nabi Muhammad, but she doesn't know that the one standing next to her is actually the Prophet. We've heard this story before. It's very highly narrated. And he walks with her and he doesn't say a word until he reaches her house. He helps her with her load. And when he gets to her house, he sets the bag there and he says to her, by the way, this person that you're calling Muhammad, that's me. I just want to let you know that. And he finally explains to her. What's interesting about this, if you look deep into the psychology of why our imams and prophets did this, and there are great Quranic examples of this too, all they really did and their main strategy was to take myself out of my own shoes and put them in the shoes of somebody else. Let's dissect this specific instance. When the Prophet is looking at her and he's seeing her and she's extremely upset at this man named Muhammad because he brought a new religion, Messenger of Allah knew. He says, look, let me take myself and put myself in her shoes. He didn't look at her and say, man, you are one crazy old woman. I've got nothing to do with you. I'm walking away from you. Take your bag and go home. No, he knew that, look, if I had my religion established, Islam, and I had anybody else from the outside come in and try to bring me a new religion, even you and I sitting right here in this masjid, imagine somebody opens the door today and says, you know what, all of you Muslims, you guys are all wrong. I've got a better religion for you. And it's much greater. It's called Christianity. And he comes and he starts preaching his religion. You and I will be like, well, what's happening? This is our territory. This is my Islam. This is my vicinity. Why is he over here? And even we have this affinity towards our religion. So all he really did, he took himself out of his shoes and says, you know what? For a second, let me take myself and put myself in her shoes. And if I can do that, if you can capture that moment where you really see somebody's point of view, you're not really pretending it, but you really see it, where I see this person's exact point of view. I know where he's coming from. I know that the reason she's acting that way is because I would react the same way if somebody came to preach a new religion. And that's why he saw it from her own perspective. We hear many stories. For example, you hear the story of Imam Ali alayhi salam, where he's walking once in the streets And as he's walking, he sees a lady who's sitting down on the ground. Just a brief example, and then I'll come to a Quranic example. She's sitting on the ground, and he comes to her, and he hears her murmuring his name, and she's cursing at him. And she's constantly doing this. So he comes closer to her. Mind you, he was the leader at the time, the Khalifa at the time, the political and spiritual leader. And he comes to her and he says to her, why are you cursing the name of this man, Ali? She says to him, you know, my husband and my son were killed in his war. And I've got kids who are orphans. What can I do? What should I do to help them? And it's all because of Ali's fault. So look at what he does. Look at his reaction. Not only does he start defending himself, well, you know what, I just want to let you know that I'm Ali, and really, I didn't really do that. I'm sorry to tell you. His reaction was, you know what, I see what her point of view is. I can put myself in her shoes and understand her situation. And look at what he does. He leaves that place. She goes home, he finds out where her house is, and he buys a lot of wheat and flour. And he takes the flour and he sets it in her house, and he starts taking water and flour and mixing it. And she has children too. And she said that her situation was so bad, she would boil food for these children to eat, for them to eat. There was nothing in the pot, it was just water. And she would tell them there's food coming to make them patient. And they'd get so bored they would go to sleep. And they would sleep hungry. That's how it went. So he took this food, he takes the flour, he takes the wheat, he mixes everything together, he puts the water with it, and he starts putting everything together. He looks at her, he says to her, do you want to care for the kids? Or should you care for the dough? Because I can play with them if you like. And she takes the dough, he takes the little children, he starts throwing them up and down in his lap, he's playing with them, and he realizes, now, he goes out and beyond, not to prove himself. He didn't have to say, well, look, I've got to prove to you that I'm a great man. I'm going to show you my laws and my constitution within my system of government, and I'm going to let you know exactly how I do things. No. All he had to do was empathize. Truly take himself out of his own shoes and put himself in the shoes of somebody else. And I swear to you, if he didn't see it that way, if he wasn't able to take himself out of his own shoes, he would never inspire her. And he would never be able to do such kindness. And it wasn't that I'm going to take myself out of my shoes simply like that. It was a genuine movement. Okay? There's a beautiful Quranic example where Ibrahim and his uncle Azar, okay? Azar looks at Ibrahim looks at Azar and says to him, my uncle, I'd like to invite you towards religion. Come towards Islam. I want you to come towards Islam. And Azar, his uncle, mind you, is a man who was creating idols. He looks at him, he says to him that if you don't stop, I'm going to take you, I'm going to crucify you, and I'm going to stone you. Imagine the response. If somebody said to you, your uncle comes to you and says, hey, by the way, I just want to let you know, I'm going to crucify you and stone you if you don't stop saying this, so please stop. Look at the reaction. And he looks at him, he looks at his uncle Azar, and this is the beautiful part, is he sees him, he looks him straight in the eye, and he says to him, Salamun alayk, sa'astaghfiru laka rabbi. In my opinion, this is one of the empathic highlights of the Quran, hands down. This is one of the climaxes of empathy in the Quran, where he looks at him and he says to him, Salamun alayk, peace be upon you, I will ask Allah to forgive you. What's that telling you? That's telling you that I know that my uncle at 60, 70 years old is not really willing to join a religion. He's lived his life the way he has for the past 60 years. And I can't change that in one night. Matter of fact, he was the one who was creating the idols. So there's a point where I understand where he's coming from, what position he's at, why he's acting the way he is. If you look at the deep message of the Quran, there's a lot of empathic examples where I take myself out of my own shoes and put them in the shoes of somebody else. And this happens very often, specifically with our parents. With our parents, it's interesting because youth are typically able to take themselves outside of their own shoes and empathize and sympathize with others, but many times when it comes to their own family, they decide not to. I can empathize with my friend. My friend comes to me and says, you know what? I've got to tell you a story. One of my really good friends was diagnosed with cancer, and we sit as friends and we empathize. Really, I know how that feels. It must really hurt inside. I feel your pain. I feel what you're going through. And in reality, when the same individual goes home, there's no empathy within the family. The mother will come to him and says, look, I've got to tell you something. I'm really sick today. Can you do this, 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 and this? And the same person will say, you know what, shrug it off. Like, no, you take care of it tomorrow. It's fine. I've got things to do. We can empathize with others, but when it comes to our own family, it's very hard to empathize. And let me tell you the psychology behind that. The reason we do that, the reason we don't empathize with our own family is because we haven't really experienced what they've experienced. We don't really experience that. Recently, I moved from the state of Minnesota to the state of Dearborn, okay, to the state of Michigan. And as I moved, as I saw my mother, specifically my mother in my own life, had one position. And as I moved, she played a completely different pivotal role in my life. All of a sudden, I was an independent person. No longer was my mother caring for me. No longer was I waking up in the morning and my mother was taking my clothes and washing them. No longer was she waking me up in the morning for sleep. No longer was I babied, oh, Habibi, come eat and do this and have this and take this and move this and take that. All of a sudden, I was in the real world. Growing up, you have to pay for the things that you get. You have to work for things. You have to take care of your own duties at home. Nobody is there to clean for you or pamper you. And all of a sudden, I'm playing the role of my mother. And empathically, I am moving, talking, saying things, doing things which my mother would always do. And the respect that I had for my mom, after 2 or 3 weeks, I called her, I was crying. I said, man, how do you do it? She says, what do you mean, how do I do it? I said, how do you do this 24/7? And I'm here trying to struggle, doing some of these things which you could do. I'm struggling to do it. She says, now you're seeing exactly how it is. But what opened my mind to this is because I was completely empathic. I didn't see her simply as mom. I saw her as an individual who I placed myself in her shoes. Recently, I went to a trip with one brother from Toronto. And as we're passing the border, I was with a group of about 15, 16 youth. We were passing the border and there was a FSA guard in front of us. And she was being extremely nasty and mean to one of the brothers who was with us. Very, very nasty. From the way she was talking to the way she was acting, and he could sense it. So she'd throw a comment at him and he'd reply in a very smiling, gentle way. Very gentle. And she'd throw another comment like, you're this, you're this, you're this. Stop doing this, move this. And he'd just be extremely gentle. He wouldn't move, he wouldn't do anything. To me, that was interesting. So after we finished, I took him aside. I said, look, this lady was extremely angry with you. Why were you so kind to her? What's your secret? He says, you know what, Ali, for 1 second, the second I was standing there looking at her, for one moment, I didn't see the person I saw in front of me. I said, well, explain to me, what does that mean? He says, for one moment, I saw her children. I saw her husband. I saw her mother, I saw her father, I saw the humanity that she possesses. Humanity that she possesses. He says, I didn't see her as this individual who was harsh and mean. He says, from the way I see it, she has to be this way because she's paid for this. He says, but I can tell somewhere inside her heart, there has to be some sort of kindness. And if I'm able to trigger that, I can change the way that she thinks. And all it really took was to move from your own point of view and put yourself in the point of view of someone else. Where now I completely understand where you're coming from. You no longer are a stranger to my attitude. And if we can really master this, our social attributes, when we have attributes and we mix with our brothers and sisters, when we mix with husbands and wives, when we mix with mothers and fathers, our complete attitude will change. No longer is it my way or the highway, but there has to be some way where I can take myself and put myself in the shoes of somebody else. And the problem is, if you look at it, we do this very seldomly, specifically to youngsters. And I say this with a pained heart. We do this very little to youngsters, where we see something that they do and we immediately reject them. Like, I'll give you an example. 2 weeks in Dearborn, one of our brothers was telling me, he says to me, look, in Dearborn, there was a party of many Shias. They came together, very educated individuals. Some are lawyers, some are trying to be pharmacists, some are trying to be doctors. And they came together as a group of Muslims, and they sat together. Even some sisters who were wearing hijab came together. You know, there's beer, there's alcohol, there's drugs, everything was there. Music, everything was there. Sexuality, the whole 9 yards. He says to me, this was existent in our community, in our society. But you know, he says to me, I don't blame them. Because at the end of the day, if we really capture their hearts, we're saying, you know what, even though you are this astray from Islam, I'm going to bring you and try to help you. Even though you're this astray from Islam, I'm going to understand your position and your point of view. Some youth are extremely misunderstood. Extremely misunderstood, where this child has been raised in such a society where there's drugs, there's violence, there's alcohol. Some children have been abused this way or that way, and the way that they are has shaped their life. Today, even as myself and Brother Ali were in the plane coming here, there was a lady who was sitting next to me. And as I conversed with her, I found out that she lived the lime life. She was in many movies. You know, she was getting paid very well. She was an actress. She was a model. She was doing all these things. And as we kept discussing with her, she kept talking. She got to a point where she started talking about God. And she's talking to me about God, you know, God, faith. And she looks at me at one point and she reveals something which is very personal, extremely personal. And Brother Ali was sitting next to me, very personally. She looks at me, she says, you know what? I stopped believing in God. I said, why? And I'm ready to backfire with my logical analysis of why God exists. And that was the way I was. I was sitting there waiting for her to say why. And all of a sudden she says one statement to me. One statement. She says, when I was 13, I was raped. 13. And for one second I looked at her, I said, you know what? I can tell exactly the reason why you are the way you are. And if I just sit there and empathize for 1 second and see you from where you're positioned, where you're coming from, my goodness, believe me, no logical analysis would have helped her in that second. In that second where I was talking to her, no logical analysis would have helped her. No high sophisticated logical proof of existence of God would have ever benefited her in any way. All she really wanted was a human being who understands the way she was. And on the day of judgment, Allah judges her based on this act. This act, as a 12-year-old, as a young 13-year-old child, you have no sins in this world. If somebody does approach you and commits a harmful action towards you, at the end of the day, Allah judges your rest of your actions based on that one transaction and interaction. And a lot of the times we see people confused. We see a brother who's listening to some of the worst music. We see brothers who might go to the club, brothers who might take drugs. And we look at them as, man, they are a downgrade or a level lower than what we are. And we don't really take the time to invite them and say, you know what? I understand your position. I understand where you grew up. Let me help you. Let me bring you up. I swear to you, I've seen brothers who've come from the worst areas, and they've completely changed their lives. I knew one brother who was smoking weed 100% many of the times, chasing the woman left and right. He was very handsome. He had long hair. Overnight, he completely changed. He cut his hair, stopped smoking weed, and he became a mentor and a volunteer for kids. Imagine, he started working with young children to help make them better. And I'm thinking to myself, how does a person go through a change? Once you create an environment where we're all empathic, I understand why you're in the position that you are, and you understand why I'm in the position that I am. Not because we say so, but because we actually live it. We live in each other's shoes. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Now this empathic example applies in many areas. If we really deeply dissect it, it applies in many areas of our lives. Many areas, if we really look at it, we can apply it to the hierarchies of the governmental systems of today, and even on a political scale, okay? If you look at something like, for example, the Palestine and Israel issue which is happening, the Israel-Palestine conflict, which many people are bringing solutions for, put aside who's right and who's wrong, and pull aside all political actions. Take the children who are involved in the situation. Children who might not have any harm. Children who might not have killed anybody or might not have harmed anybody. Some people would tell you that the best solution to this is to take these young children who have not harmed each other yet, who have not seen the hate, and let them interact. Let them interact, where you let them see each other's limelight. Instead of this young child growing up seeing his neighbors and his father being killed by an Israeli and saying, you know what, I hate every single Jewish person on earth. And instead of that Jewish person growing up and saying, you know what, because my father or my mother was killed by a Palestinian person, that's it, I hate every single Palestinian person on earth. And what this does is this removes the empathy from our society. And there are many programs that do this. Sometimes we think that it's all conflict. No, there are many programs that do this. There's a beautiful program in that area where a Palestinian family who's lost one family member, a mother, a father, a child, is taken and connected to an Israeli family which has also lost a mother, a father, a brother from the same family. Now they're not coming to discuss who's right and who's wrong. They're not coming to discuss this is my land and this is your land. They're coming together on the basis of empathy. I've lost a human and you've lost a human. Let's come together and discuss what's happening. Let's come together and see what the solutions are to our problems. Sympathize with me. Tell me, how was your mother acting? I'll tell you how my father used to act. And you tell me how your father used to act. I'll tell you how my mother used to act. Look at that. That's more of a sympathetic movement. There's sympathy, there's empathy. Not only that, there are many, for example, hotlines where if I'm a Palestinian and I decide to pick up the phone and call this 1-800 number, I immediately get referred to an Israeli who's got the same position I'm in. They've lost a family member. And there's over 6 million calls which have been logged. People call each other all the time just to sympathize and say, you know what, you're on the other side. Let me tell you what my life is like. And you tell me what your life is like. Let's understand each other. Let's come to a closer conclusion. And even within our societies, instead of, at times, we find the need to banish individuals. Within a community, I've seen this so many times. If I have an issue with a brother, I don't respect him, I tolerate him. And tolerance is extremely different than respect. There's a huge difference. Tolerance is extremely different than respect. I might have an issue with somebody where I sit there and I tolerate them. I don't respect them. Every time I see this individual, I have this itch in my heart. There's an itch. It's right there. I see him. I say, Assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you? MashaAllah, great to see you. But inside my heart, there's an itch. It's right there. I can almost put my finger on it. That's when you know within a community, within two individuals, there's tolerance. Respect is when you remove yourself out of your own circle and put yourself in the circle of that individual, where you start putting yourself in their own shoes and understand why they act the way they do. That's when you've reached respect. Respect doesn't really mean that I have to accept your values. So you say, oh, respect means if I have an opinion, you take my opinion and you work on it. If I have an individual, for example, who's a homosexual, the whole world has to accept me as a homosexual. And if they don't accept that, then they haven't been respecting me. No. Respect is that I look at the individual, I value their beliefs, I put myself in their shoes, and I understand why they're thinking the way they're thinking. That's a whole different perspective. Now no longer do I pass by this brother at mosque, at school, at work, and I've got this itch in my heart. I can approach him and I can completely make the situation better by saying, you know what, I apologize, and instead of tolerating you, I respect you. And this respect means I take all of your actions and I know why you're acting this way because of certain past experiences in your life, and I accept your experiences and I accept your opinions and your ideas. Let's come together to discuss how we should do things. Let's come together and discuss how things should be made, how things should be done. When this approach is taken in our communities, we flower. We become an empathic society. No longer can any individual stop us. We're completely empathic. And that means I'm putting myself in your shoes, you're putting yourself in my shoes. Let's see it from that perspective. And as much as times, if we really want to understand how this can be done, we need to out-respect. If we don't look outside of our world, it's impossible for us to understand how these things run. It's very hard. If we don't look at the outside world, it's very hard to put ourselves in their shoes. Recently, I was on a trip to Ziyarah in Iraq. And I thought to myself that as much as going there and seeing the shrine of Imam Hussein and praying in that holy land and being in that holy land and being a part of that area is so powerful, and I urge all my younger brothers to participate. Some people haven't experienced it, especially the young ones. I think, you know what, I'm just gonna go there. It's the place is very rotten. I'm going to cry and come back. It's much more than that, much more. If that's what you think it is, then you're very, very myopic visioned. It was one of the most amazing, upheavaling experiences in my life. Not because I simply went there and I'm on holy land. Standing on holy land and standing on normal land is no difference, by the way. I don't feel any difference. I'll be very honest with you. Standing on holy land and normal land does not make me a better person. I don't start giving charity as soon as I hit holy land. Like, oh, now I'm on holy land, I've got to start giving charity. I'm on holy land, I got to start praying. I'm on holy land, I've got to start fasting. I'm on holy land, I can't lie, I'm sorry. Ask me in America, because it's not holy, I can lie to you then. No, that's not how it works. Holy land and normal land, the difference is I start understanding things better. I get an aura of understanding. And the real experience when I went there is seeing all of the youth which are around me. You know, you walk in the streets, and one of the most amazing experiences is the walk from Najaf to Karbala. And I always relay this because it touched me. It really touched me. The walk from Najaf to Karbala, which is a 3-day walk, you're walking from one part of Iraq to another. And as you're walking, it's not simple movement. You're walking in many stages. You sleep for 3 nights. And when you walk, there are literally thousands of people, person to person, standing, person to person, and I mean it literally, standing, waiting to feed you, waiting to give you a massage, waiting to care for you, waiting to give you a drink, waiting for anything. And what interests me is that these individuals are not rich people. Many of them put their life savings in these areas where they feed others. Their whole life savings. This man might be poor, dirt poor, where his family of 14 sleeps in one house, but he's willing to give his whole work for this situation. Living in the society which we live in today, a capitalistic movement where it's all about take, take, take. Give me as much as you can. I've got the iPhone 4, I need the iPhone 4S, and then when the iPhone 5 comes out, I need it. And 10 years from now, we'll have the iPhone 10, because we have to keep getting the same exact one over and over again, and the cycle never ends. It's a materialistic society. You look at, for example, the prison system in America. The prison system in America is made to entrap people and enslave them and make them laborers and make money from them. That's why 60% or 70% of the slave facilities in America are not owned by the government. They're owned by private investors, where a person that goes to jail, these private investors make $40,000 per person. We don't speak about these things because say, look, it's normal, everything is fine and dandy. Everything is okay. Go to any prison institution. Most of them are privately owned. Where if a person goes to jail, and by the way, it so happens ironically to be that 75% of them are African Americans. What a coincidence. And every person that goes to jail, this federal in this specific institution which owns it, it's not owned by the government, gets $40,000 per inmate. And the way the system is made is there's very little rehab. This person will leave after a sentence of 20 or 30 years, will go to the real world. He's got a criminal record, he's a crook, he's a rapist, he's an alleged murderer, he's this, he's a drug dealer. And the minute he goes to the real world to apply a job, nobody's willing to accept him because he's got all these bad qualities. Any of you who have jobs, you know there's a criminal check. In order for you to get a job, you have to go past a criminal check. Now when these people try to go to try to get a job, they can't. Society won't accept them. Their own families won't accept them. And it's a perfect recycling system. This person goes crazy out of his mind. He's forced back into prison. Because where am I going to get free sleep, free food, meals every day? I get to sit and relax by myself. I can read if I want to. I can walk around if I want to. Very small area. I can use a restroom. It's better than living in the real world. And the way we've done it is it's a complete recycling system. And for the ones who are in the hierarchies, it's great because they make money. There's a lot of money being made. Look at the war system. It's the same exact situation. Any country which goes to war today, there's a huge benefit. There's a benefit to individuals going to war. Because when you stimulate war, you stimulate weapon creation. Those corporations who own the weapons make money because everybody's making weapons. Look at the way that things work. It's all money driven. We live in a completely capitalistic society which is driven by money, wealth, money, wealth. And the corporate systems are continually shoving it down our throats. Now going to Iraq is, my God, this is a breath of fresh air. I see poor people, poor, dirt poor. When I say poor, I don't mean poor like this person has an iPhone or an iPod, poor. I mean this guy has very ripped clothing, poor. I mean this person has no shoes, poor. I mean his mother or his father, one of them has passed away recently and he can't even get electricity, poor. That's the kind of poor I'm talking about, just so that we understand. Because in today's terms, if I don't have the latest car, I'm poor. If I don't have the latest shoes, I'm poor. I'm very poor. And it's interesting because when I went there, even as we're walking, there was a young little boy, 7-year-old. I saw his father send him to me as I was walking. And he comes to me and he says, look, we have food made for you. You have to come and stop and eat. A 7-year-old. And I'm thinking to myself, who taught you this? Comes to me. He says, look, I want you to come and eat food. We've made so much food for people. I want you to come and eat. I said, no, you know what? I've just ate. I have to keep walking. And he holds my leg. Literally, he holds me. He hugs my leg. And he said, no, you can't leave. You have to stay and eat. I said, why? He says, because if you don't eat, Imam Hussein's barakah won't come to us. Now, this is a young child who might not really understand what's happening. But Hussein has been able to instill some sort of empathy in him where he knows that even if he goes poor and I eat, it's much better for him than him eating. And this is not a rich individual, this is a poor individual. What shocked me is 21 million people who come to the city are fed by a country which is poverty struck, where we live in a country which is extremely wealthy and have got poverty all over the world. That's ironic to me. That's extremely ironic. And when you see this society, when you see this kind of work where people are continuously working towards you, you start empathizing. I went to a family in Karbala. You go 10 minutes away from the Haram, by the way, 15 minutes, there are individuals who are extremely poor. A family of 21 living in a house which is from that blue mat right there, maybe to this blue mat, over to this wall. 21, no running water, scorching hot. When it rains, everything drips. And seeing this experience as, my God, I say I want to put myself in the shoes of these people. Now I really can do it. I really can put myself in their shoes. I can really empathize. Many of us sympathize, but we don't empathize. We think that we're empathizing. Sympathy is when I see you, whether you're right or wrong, whether you're good or bad. I say, you know what, I feel so bad for you. If Saddam Hussein was being hung, this person say, you know what, I feel so bad for Saddam Hussein. Poor guy is being hung. Why hang him? Just shoot him so he can die faster. Some people think this is sympathy. Empathy is, no, I'm going to take myself out of my own shoes and put myself in your shoes. And what that does is that stimulates me to act. Empathy involves action.
Where now I'm not only saying it or I'm feeling it, but it's now moving and being demonstrated by a certain form of action. The more I act, the more I do, the more I understand why things happen the way they do. And I become an empathic human being. It makes us more creative. Now, empathy might sound like a very fluffy concept. Or, I've got to go around and be really nice to everyone around me. True. But empathy starts revolutions. If you look at all the major revolutions in the world, they were started by empathy. A rich person or a poor person put himself in the shoes of somebody else and says, you know what, I'm sick of the lifestyle that we're living. We really need to change our lives. And empathy is not this fluffy concept where we go around loving everyone. Loving everyone is important and we need to. But to some people it sounds, this is very, very fluffy. I can't bring this in my life. No, it's a very powerful movement. And by the way, great leaders will always try to stop their people from being empathic because they know once their society is empathic, they will change the whole situation. Why do you think the music industry is so big? Or there's so much pop culture giving to us in TV? Do we ever really see on the main channels of TV poor people? When was the last time you opened TV and you saw an African child and had a documentary scene of an African child and how he lives? When was the last time you opened TV and saw sweatshops? What do kids in sweatshops do? When was the last time we saw the children in Sierra Leone and their limbs being chopped? When was the last time we saw a documentary about them? We don't see these things because it's the dream of rulers to take our society and make it as less empathic as possible. Don't think about what's happening on the other side. Don't worry about it. Worry about what you have in here. Worry about the things that you have today. Worry about what you're going to wear tomorrow to school. That's very important. It's extremely important. Make sure you plan that 3 days ahead. Worry about what kind of belt buckle you're going to wear. Worry about what kind of car you're going to drive. Worry about your own individualistic self and see where you can go tomorrow. Forget abroad. You can't really make a big change abroad. And that's the kind of mentality. The reason we're fed so much garbage, sometimes we ask, well, why are we fed so much garbage? Why are drugs circulated in our community? Why is prostitution circulated in our community? Why is the club scene circulated in our community? It's for this reason. Let me help you forget so that you completely forget what empathy is. And a lot of these individuals who run this life where they're in the limelight, they become very, very less empathic. It's all about me and what I get, and the rest of the world really can burn for all I care. That's a very dangerous lifestyle. And the person who's extremely intelligent says, you know what, if I really want to become empathic, I've got to make a sacrifice. And I know the value of it. But this thing is that we sell things for cheap. If there's a child in Sierra Leone who gets a diamond, they get diamonds this big, worth maybe $6 million, $7 million. They'll take this diamond and they'll sell it for a piece of bread. They'll sell it for a shoe, for a shirt, because they've undervalued it. The same person who buys it from them takes it and says, you know what, this is a $6 million diamond. I can sell this for great amounts. To the Americans, I can sell it for $50 million. They won't even care, they'll still buy it. It's a great amount. That child has sold it for cheap, but the other individual has taken it and says, you know what? I know the value of this. A lot of the times we don't know the value of these things. The value of empathy is in the results. If you see the results of an empathic human being, they are some of the best people on earth. They listen before speaking, which is an attribute of our imams. They are kind and they are giving even if they're in the worst situation. They don't judge a person from the first time they see them, but they make judgments. They don't even make judgments. They see them and they simply give for the sake of giving. Look at the story of Lady Fatemah. We're here to commemorate her death. If you look at within the Quran, there's a beautiful verse with respect to her, and I feel this is the most powerful verse about her specifically. Allah says in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا إِنَّمَا نُطْعِمُكُمْ لِوَجْهِ اللَّهِ لَا نُرِيدُ مِنْكُمْ جَزَاءً وَلَا شُكُورًا. This verse, Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا. We feed them for the sake of Allah. We feed a miskin and a yatim and a asir. Miskin is a person who's overpowered. Yatim is a person who is an orphan. And asir is a prisoner. Now, if you look at the story and historically why this verse came down, Imam Hassan alayhi salam was once extremely ill, and Lady Fatemah asked Allah, she says, oh Allah, if he is healed, then I will swear to you that for 3 consecutive nights I will fast. And for 3 nights she fasted. Every night she came to break her fast with simple food. Look at the empathy that she displays. Let's take this one lesson tonight. Take it home with us. And say, you know what, how can I be more empathic in my lifestyle? Every night she would start to eat and a person would knock on her door. The first night the miskin came to knock on her door. And he says to her, "O servant of Allah, do you have food to give me?" And mind you, she's been fasting. It's the first day she's trying to break her fast. And as she's breaking her fast, a person knocks on the door. She takes all the food that she has and gives it to them. Empathy. Complete empathy. Forget myself. Forget what I feel. Let me think about how you feel. I wonder how you're feeling inside. What's your situation? As bad as I have it, you might have it even worse. And the next night, imagine, now she hasn't ate for a day. Now she hasn't ate for 2 days. 2 days, she's only drank water. She hasn't ate. Someone else knocks on the door and she opens the door, and the person who's there is an orphan. And they say to her, "O servant of Allah, can you give us from the food?" And she gives them all the food. Now the third day, more interestingly, a prisoner comes. And a prisoner is a different situation, because a prisoner now can be good or bad. Are you a good prisoner or are you a bad prisoner? Have you committed a crime or have you not committed a crime? There are so many interrogational questions you can ask a person. She could have asked him 1,001 questions. Tell me, which crime have you been convicted for? And why are you a prisoner? Did you do anything wrong? Are you an army prisoner? Are you a Muslim? Are you a non-Muslim prisoner? And the Quran skips all of that. Skips all of that. Sometimes we even see a poor person in the street. We say, no, I can't give him $1 because he might go get drunk with it. I can't give him, he's not a Muslim, I can't give him anything. Oh, he might go buy alcohol with it. He might go buy drugs with it. Are we in the hearts of people for us to understand? And sometimes I wonder, we take things in such a way where we are completely putting ourselves in our mindsets. And Lady Fatemah doesn't even interrogate the prisoner. She takes the food and she completely gives it to him. And now for 3 nights she hasn't ate. Look at the selflessness and the sacrifice. Empathy can be reached through a level of selflessness and sacrifice. And the way I see it is that when it came time for her to really be put in these situations, to me, she is one of the greatest role models on empathy. Greatest. Show me one lady within history or society who on her night of her wedding is willing to take her dress and give it away to the person who is in front of her. One lady asks her, because she's very poor, she goes inside, she takes off her dress, her wedding dress. She's just married, and she gives it to this lady in front of her. And when I see that, I think, my God, the level of empathy that she had, the level of selflessness and sacrifice that she was able to give, where now it's not only about me. It's not only about what I feel or what I want. It's about, what do you want? What's your interest in life? How can I help you come to your conclusions? And that's why when she comes towards her death, after being so empathic towards the society, after giving so much, it's sad that after all of that, she has to be buried in the middle of the night. Where she's buried in secret. Nobody till today knows where she's buried. And she comes to Imam Ali alayhi salam, she's sitting next to him, and she says to him, "Oh Ali, I would like to inform you that tomorrow is going to be my death. I just want to let you know that when I do die, please bury me. Bury me in the middle of the night where nobody knows where I'm buried. Don't let any of these men walk in my ceremony because they have harmed me in my life." And she says to him, "Oh Ali, when I die and you bury me in the ground, sit by my head and recite Quran. I love your voice of recitation in the Quran." And I think about that. What goes through the mind of a husband when his wife says to him, "Tomorrow when I die, make sure you sit by my grave and you recite Quran." It's a very heartbreaking situation. I think about that. It's extremely painful. When Imam Ali alayhi salam is in the masjid and she is in the house, and Hassan and Hussein come inside the house and they talk to her servant, Fadla. They say to her, "Fadla, where's our mother Fatemah? We're so used to eating with her." She puts the food for them and they sit to eat. And they say to her mother, "Oh Fadla, when have you seen us eat without our mother sitting with us? We always eat with our mother sitting with us. Call her." She says to them, "No, your mother is tired, eat." And she looks at them and they look at her and say, "We've never ate without our mother being with us. How can we eat now?" So what she does is they go towards the room of her mother. And they go inside her room and they see that her mother is lying down on the bed, and they come next to her. Hussein comes to her, Hassan comes to her. And Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam comes to his mother. He says to her, "Mother Fatemah, speak to me, I swear to you. Mother of Fatemah, speak to me, my dear mother." Al-Hussein comes to his mother, Lady Fatemah. He says to her, "My mother, oh Fatemah, I am your beloved Hussein. I am your beloved Hussein. Oh mother, speak to me." They realize their mother has passed away. Fadla says to them, "Oh Hassan, oh Hussein, call your father Amir al-Mu'mineen and bring him home.
Imam Ali alayhi salam comes to the house and he sits over the body of his wife, Lady Fatemah. The next day he comes to bury her body. He stands on her body and he is washing her. As he was washing the body of the holy Lady Fatemah, he backs away from the body. Fadda says to him, my master Ali, why did you back away from the body of your wife, Lady Fatemah? He says to her, Fadda, don't blame me. I felt her broken rib as my hand passed over her body. Imam Ali alayhi salam takes Lady Fatemah, he places her in her kafan, and he looks at the doorway and he says, my dear son Hassan, my dear son Hussein, come bid farewell to your mother Fatemah. They come to the body of their mother, Lady Fatemah. They hug their mother's body. Imagine two young children, orphans, are hugging the body of their mother. And Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam takes Lady Fatemah alayhi salam. He buries her body in the middle of the night. He puts the soil over her body and he takes his children back home and he puts them to sleep. Later in the night he comes to the same graveyard and he sits over the grave of his wife Fatemah. He recites the Holy Quran, and as if Amir al-Mu'mineen goes to sleep, in his dream he sees Lady Fatemah telling him, oh Ali, Zainab has awoken from her sleep. Go back to the house and put Zainab back to sleep. I say, my dear Fatemah, if you are worried about Zainab waking up from her sleep, then what will you say when you see the body of your son Hussein in Karbala? What will you say when you see his headless body over the sands? When Ali al-Akbar was passing away on the ground, Imam Hussein alayhi salam comes over his body and he looks at him. He says to him, my dear son Ali, as I approached you, I saw you smiling and I saw you crying. Why do you smile and why do you cry? He says, this dear father Hussein, when I smiled, I saw my grandfather. I saw Rasulullah bringing me a cup of water from Al-Kawthar. And when I cried, I saw my grandmother, Lady Fatemah. She is looking at my wounds and she is looking at your body and saying, Wa walada wa Husayna. أفاطم لو خلت الحسين مجدلا وقد مات عطشانا بشط فراتي إذا للطمت الخد فاطمة عنده وأجريت دمع العين بالوجنات إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين يا الله. Let's raise our hands towards dua, inshallah. We'll recite Aman Yajibu 5 times and we'll recite Ya Allah 11 times. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء يا الله 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 اللهم شافي جميع المرضى يا الله اللهم اقضي جميع حوائجنا يا الله make us sinners in our communities يا الله keep us on the path of Muhammad وآل محمد ولأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات نقرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة تسبقها صلوات